Hi, everybody. I hope you have been enjoying the conference so far. My name is Maja Goodman, and I work at the Lean Enterprise Institute in the United States. And I am joined today by my colleague, Karen Gaudet.
Hey,
And I am so excited to be talking with Karen today because there's a lot of people who can talk the talk, but this is a woman who can walk the walk. And that is evident if you haven't already read it in her book, Steady Work. It's a heartbreaking, but also a fantastic story of how Lean was supportive in a time of crisis. Um, so hi, Karen, welcome. Thank you for being here.
super excited to have our conversation tonight.
Awesome, me too. I think we often hear, how can Lean apply outside of manufacturing? And how am I supposed to do a Gemba walk when all the work is in a computer? And what's our tact if, we don't make a widget every 60 seconds? So what's our tact? So we'll talk about some of these questions today. We're going to look at a knowledge work example, and we're going to look at this knowledge work example through the frame of the Lean transformation framework. If you're familiar with this, what we like to call the LTF sometimes, great. And if you're not familiar with it, don't worry about it. We will post a link later on and you can learn about it later. But at the moment, let's take a look at what is this knowledge work example. So Karen, can you just let us know what are we looking at here? Where did this take place, if you're
Yes.
at liberty to say?
Yeah, so this story takes place in a university here in the US. And, from a value-driven purpose perspective, they are really trying to ensure that they can align the donors' needs. So one of the things that they do is obviously they get donors who provide significant funding for tremendous research that occurs that we all benefit from in the world. And so their value-driven purpose is really to kind of align the donor and with the needs of the organization or the university in this case.
Great.
Yep.
And so even if we don't work at a university, we can probably relate to this idea that there's some kind of large strategic objective. And in the case of the university, there's lots of projects that support that objective. That maybe that's the same in all of our businesses as well. And in universities, particularly in the US, we require lots of times outside funding. And it sounds like in this particular case, the funding is dependent upon an official proposal. And so that's what we'll keep talking about, is this proposal writing process that Karen just mentioned. Okay, so if we're looking at the LTF here, we're really focused on this value-driven purpose piece. And thanks, Karen, for teeing that up for us. That's what's happening. They're like playing a matchmaker, sort of, it
They
sounds.
absolutely, yeah, they absolutely are. They absolutely are. So the proposal in and of itself is the vehicle in which those two things get matched up. So the needs of this university and the potential donors, whether those are individuals or organizations.
Okay. And as an example, what's a project? What's something that the university maybe wants funding for?
Oh, it might be something for some significant research that's required. Could be on the economy or global warming or something, all the way to potentially a building. So potentially supplying the funds to Doan for healthcare, right?
That's great. All right, so let's take a look at the process. We'll do a real broad view of the process first. So, so here we've got these two different areas. We've got the key stakeholder, and this would be what within the university, Karen? Who's an example of a key stakeholder?
It might be a dean, certainly a faculty member,
Okay.
somebody who it has a specialty that is looking to garner funds for their particular research that they are responsible for or that they advocate for.
Okay, so they kind of own this project. And then the development office, who kind of, in a way, owns the relationship with the donor. Okay.
Yes.
And at this point, we bring in
The
our
writer.
important proposal writer. And in order to get this proposal done, let's just talk through what we're seeing here.
Yeah, so the way that these two relationships come together or converge around the proposal is that there's a project, and there's details that are required in order for the donor to get matched, meaning I have these funds and you have this project. I'm passionate about the project that you have, so I would like my funds to go to that project. And so the proposal in and of itself, that process actually takes the inputs from both of those key stakeholders, and pulls them together to create almost a vision, really. Our vision and some information that helps the donor see how exactly their funds will be used, and how those two things would come together.
Sure. Okay. So if I'm donating $1 million, let's say, wouldn't that be nice? I would probably want to know that it's being used for something useful, and it's not just going to, I don't know, paint lines on the parking lot or something.
Absolutely. It's a
Okay.
pretty intimate relationship when you think about somebody who has funds available. They really want to make sure that their funds are going to something that's really meaningful to them,
Mhm.
that will get fulfilled in a very clear way so that they have an understanding of what that will be.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to that. If we donate, we want to know it's going to something that aligns with our own values. Great. Okay. So the proposal writer is brought in, they know what they're supposed to do. They go find the key stakeholder who's all excited. Yay, my project is going to get funded. And the proposal writer says, okay, I'm going to send you an email. And they get back some little bit of information.
Mm.
And just kind of watching this email exchange back and forth with our highly technical emojis here, folks. It looks like it could be better. It could be a better process.
Yeah, we all experience that email exchange between two people and how so much gets lost in the intention and the details of the vision that's required. And so the proposal writer in this position is trying to really discern what the vision is for, let's say, the dean or a faculty member, in relationship to their project that they need funds for. So they're trying to go back and forth and understand what is it you really are looking for, and how do I garner information so I can do the proper research to put this proposal together.
Mm. And it sounds like, okay, so here they finally make sense of all these details. They get it in their proposal. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, how are these writers viewed within the institute, within the university?
Well, they're pretty critical to the process for sure. However,
Mhm.
the process in and of itself, in its current state, is not enabling them to do their best work. So they work really hard in trying to pull information from key stakeholders, pull it together, and they're responsible for the quality of the product that actually gets pulled together, which is known as that proposal itself. So they're very important to the process. However, the process is not enabling them to be their best.
Sure. And you end up with people feeling something like this at the end
Yeah.
of it. But okay, the proposal gets completed for better or worse, and it's shared with the donor. And there's times even after all that effort, the donor says no. And you
No,
were telling me this one story of them saying it took too long and they took their money elsewhere.
it
What
took,
was what was the
and
impact there?
it unfortunately cost this, in this situation over, 30 plus $1 million, because it took so long going back and forth trying to actually represent, what this project was going to be about and what type of funding would be needed and how those funds, significant funds in this case, would realize its fruition, in this vision. And so it was really disappointing for this team to understand what transpired in this process.
Absolutely. To feel responsible for losing 30 plus $1 million. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so they bring you in and you want to learn more about their process. And there's this question. I don't know if we're able to see the chat. Hopefully we can see the chat somewhere, but I'm curious, anybody listening, and if you have your own ideas about how you in your own experience have observed computer-based work, please
Mm.
do chime in the chat. Meanwhile, let's take a look at what Karen did with this team. They went to a whiteboard and ended up creating this, which might look a bit overwhelming. So let's just talk through it one piece at a time.
Sure.
First, I just can't imagine this background knowledge that, okay, we are maybe responsible for losing $30 million, and then staring at this big whiteboard. I can empathize with how overwhelming that must have felt for the team at the time.
Yeah, in some ways, it almost felt like a magic trick, right? Because we're trying to make what's invisible visible. And
Yeah.
it was so challenging. So what we did was we started with two very specific examples, and we first started with kind of representing visually what are the high level process steps that a proposal goes through from start to finish. So that is what the A through J represents on this.
Okay. So they're just
The
letters here, but on the real whiteboard, it was
major,
listed out
the
process.
actual process steps.
And then these artifacts, can you tell us about what you used for artifacts from these two specific examples that you guys looked at?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually took two very specific examples and took the time to literally print out every email communication in relationship to both. And we cut them out by date and posted them on this wall along each process step so we could see the time that it took, the context of what was happening inside that communication, and the time associated with each one of those steps.
Okay. So unlike a Gemba walk where you might be able to see what's happening right now, this was a retrospective, but I'm curious to see how that helped open some eyes, maybe open some minds too. So yeah, talk to us more about what you observed through those, what you could learn through those emails.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was clear through the context of these emails, you could tell at each point in the process the lack of clarity that was provided to the proposal writer, who is in the position of having to take whatever information they can garner, do some research on it, and pull it together into the actual said proposal. And so from a quality perspective, that was really interesting for them to begin to learn about very differently, so that it wasn't necessarily a personal thing, because the writers are very good at what they do. But
Mhm.
what was really the quality and the accuracy, based on accuracy and timeliness of each one of these process steps, given the number of times and touches that need to happen between the proposal writer and the actual stakeholder who had the information.
Okay, great. So in case folks didn't catch it, the C/A is complete and accurate. Okay. And then we've got these little icons here.
Yeah, so basically that's the information was sitting in the email box. So it's literally electronically sitting in someone's inbox. And we could see how long it was sitting for different individuals within the process. Yep.
And then this green here. What's the difference between active and cycle time? Let's look at just B. What does this mean? What's this telling us?
Yeah, so we were able to actually, because we printed them out and checked them against the time, etc., we were able to discern actually how long the value creating work was for the proposal writer. And that's defined as they're either writing for the proposal or doing research. So that's the value that they really create to the proposal that's kind of moving through this process. And so we were able to actually discern that the cycle time of that process step was 2 days, but the actual value creating work time was 35 minutes. And we continue to do that for every single step along the way.
Excellent. And then you could see how long the whole, so the donor had said it was too long,
Too long.
but
Yep.
did the team even know what too long meant? Did they know how long it took?
They knew that it was long, but they didn't really understand how long and what the relationship was to actually the time that was adding value to the actual process. So how much time was actually waiting and moving, which was 9 weeks. So this entire process took 9 weeks. But if we actually add up the value creating time, the times that are active on the top, we actually see that the actual value creating time of this work was much smaller than the nine weeks, and it was 7.5 days so much. that blew their mind. And they really, one, were feeling completely validated, but then also freed to the fact that they actually had some context and some facts about two very strong examples. So they started to feel really empowered by that information, that they could actually do something with it.
Sure. I'm sure we have all worked in places where you feel like you're hustling and bustling. You're working so hard, everyone's working hard, and yet 9 weeks only to be told no. We've probably all been in some kind of version of that situation. So yeah, I can imagine how eye-opening that must have been to see, wait, we were working this whole time and yet most of the time wasn't useful.
Oh, it's terrible.
It must have really lit a fire. Okay, so this was we're seeing here that this was a push system, really.
Literally.
Yeah.
It was a system. Yes. A push system and a waiting system.
Okay. So connecting back to the broad LGC topic that we're part of is connecting strategy with activity. They had to looking at the strategy goals of the university.
Absolutely.
Talk to us about how, you know, how could they define tact? How could they connect, you know, their proposal writing up with the goals of the university?
Yeah, so they absolutely they obviously had, you know, goals for the year. So we were able to actually take that and boil that down to understanding how many proposals did they actually need to write. And these are proposals that are certain dollar amount and above for this university. And so through that information, we were able to actually understand if this is the total number that's required at this amount or more, what is the total number of proposals on average that need to get done? And then what is the available time really to get those done? And so within a 12-month period. So we boiled all of that down and came up with the tact time for this actual work. Yep.
And even some basic things, and people will recognize this is a version of a value stream map. Even basic questions like who is their customer and who is their supplier, I can see how those would be critical. And of course, that's the information flow. Okay, so this was one of the things they really wanted to focus on, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Increase the complete and accuracy to ensure quality. Given the funds that are this is representing, it's critical that it is of the highest level of quality.
Okay.
Yep.
Makes perfect sense. And of course, reduce lead time. We can see the connection between those things.
Yeah,
Okay.
we now had a measured gap on what the lead time was, right? So we were able to actually begin to think about what really is behind the problems that is contributing to those two key problems and what might we do about it.
Sure. Now I could imagine if I knew I were responsible for potentially losing $30+ million and I'm staring at a whiteboard, I would immediately come with ideas. We should do this, we should do this, we should do this. I think that that's probably pretty common. How did seeing this information and having, you know, saying 4 weeks, not 9 weeks, and CNA is a problem, and these guys, how did that affect the conversation in the room?
Yeah, so we were able to actually kind of tease out what specifically would represent quality, and had good discussion and kind of practical understanding around, you know, oftentimes we in knowledge work, the actual level of quality is not clearly defined, and or the timing that's involved in order to provide that level of quality from one process step to the next. And so being able to actually articulate that clearly and coming up with some standard recommendations in regards to what would actually define the quality differently than they had ever thought of in this way before. And then translating that as well then to, all right, so to get it down to a reasonable amount of time, while giving still some capacity for the information to sit and get nurtured with the key stakeholders and the donors, because that is part of the time that they create value. And coming up with the actual system and process of improving the quality and accuracy through templates. and doing interviews. So instead of doing emails back and forth, they designed a process that they would actually do a front-loaded interview to the key stakeholder with somewhat of a templated questionnaire to understand the quality and the details that were required. So that proposal writer would now not be starting in the dark. They were actually starting with a true vision of this key stakeholder to match up through this proposal with the donor. And then having key templates for them to draw from to ensure kind of standardized quality attribute.
Excellent. Okay, so the big part of the process improvement sounds like these three key points, right? That they could recognize tact and the gap between current and target, and zeroed in on the interview process and the templates. Great. Okay, so then they also need to develop some capability in order to realize these things. There's a reason that we have in the LTF these two walls both holding up the roof. So let's talk about this a little bit. Pardon me while I just move things forward. Okay, so these were some of the questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
All
In
right.
in order to even solve those problems and start to think about them in a really measured way, they had some pretty substantive discussion and understanding of what it was going to take, not only from influencing key stakeholders and others within the process, but actually their own ability to solve key problems in this process. And through understanding it, they were able to actually create measured problem-solving activities and prepare to bring the key stakeholders along. So they developed an approach to gaining input on the problems and how they experienced them and how it was impacting the different customers throughout the process, as well as the donor, and develop an improved system.
Fantastic. So this first question here about can we really drop from 9 weeks to 4 weeks? It looks like the answer to that question was right in front of everybody if they address these things. Okay. And so in order to effectively use these templates and in order to effectively switch from email to an interview, what is this telling us here, this icon?
Yes, they actually created a supermarket. So they were able to discern what are the things that can be standardized to help stabilize on this process, and then what are the pieces that need to not be standardized so that they can continue to enable the innovation and the creativity that's required in order to match the donor with the particular project. And so they created the supermarket that they now can pull from, depending on the situation. If it meets certain criteria, they can pull from this and then customize from that point forward.
Makes sense. I think we can all relate to that too, that it's easy to think, no, every proposal is different because every donor is different, every project is different. But in reality, there's quite a bit of overlap and we can learn from each other. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. And they had to learn what complete and accurate meant. I'm going to speed up here a little bit since we only have 6.5 minutes. But okay, so these were some of the things that were focused on with capability development. And next, they had to address the management system and how the two leaders of this proposal writing process behaved and supported things. So we have these three pictures here. You were told that when you arrived, this was more or less how they felt. Can you please translate these photos for us?
So runaway horse or running blind. So truly,
Okay.
they were trying to work without having information that they needed to actually complete their work.
Okay. This looks like a
Begging like poor puppies, trying to get fed from the key stakeholders what their vision was for the different proposals, because they had never been in that earlier part of the process before.
Okay. And then this one, I'm gonna guess is firefighting.
Firefighting.
Fantastic. All right, so if those were the current state and we wanted to get rid of these, the opposite would be what, measuring?
Yeah, so they came up with through the tact what would be required each month and each week, and so they could begin to see ahead or behind. And so that enabled them to now begin to actually have those conversations earlier on, and they can understand what specifically within their process is taking longer than it should be, and address them as they're happening. So
Brilliant. And then how
yeah.
did that influence their meetings?
much more productive and to the point and aligned, really.
That's fantastic. And I apologize that we're going kind of quickly here, but okay, so they had these KPIs, they had things they could measure against, like must do 3 interviews a week. They had the regular check-ins with their meetings, and they could be more proactive. Fantastic. The basic thinking and mindset, I mean, I can only imagine, but please talk about the shift that happened there.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. They're in a whole different place heading into this next coming year, knowing that they have a process they can actually push against, that everyone's aligned around, which will create much more effective problem solving for everyone involved.
That's fantastic. And in terms of, actually, we were talking before about that the proposal writers, even though they have this critical job, that they weren't respected, that they had no authority, you know, so what are you going to do in that situation? And how are they feeling coming out of this project?
They feel tremendous about it. They feel really strong that they have approached it in a really strong way, brought people along, and now have a process they can actually use. So they're feeling much better about it.
That's so great to hear. So we have a few questions for you, actually, if for the folks listening in. Just curious how this relates to your own experiences with knowledge work. This is obviously not the only way to go about things. And I'm seeing here in our question and answer panel that a couple people made some recommendations about DORA metrics for software development. And and yes, Anastasia, the mass of emails and the lack of clarity for sure, big problems. So if you don't mind answering the chat, we'd love to hear, you know, how does this relate to your own experiences? And if you have had a similar issue, how you approached it. And you know what, I would love to hear other people's response to this. But Karen, can you talk a little bit about this? I mean, resistance to change is pretty universal. How was that responded to or proactively avoided or whatever?
Yeah, this team actually did a really nice job in how they approach the stakeholder meetings and bringing people along and understanding in particular stakeholders' experience with the problems that they were representing. And because they had facts, very specific facts that they could share, it really enabled people to come along and understand what they were talking about, agree with what they're talking about, and then open up to some experimentation. So it was very helpful to have the facts.
Fantastic. Great. Let's see, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat or in the question and answer field. But otherwise we can let people go. I'm just so glad that you've been able to share this story, Karen.
Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful opportunity to share this university's story. They did some tremendous work in a really challenging time where it's usually hidden. So they really opened themselves up to kind of making their work visual.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Let's see. I don't see any questions coming in. So I wish everybody a great rest of your day at whatever point you are in it. And enjoy the rest of the event.
All righty. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Karen. Bye-bye.